Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Preparis. Not joining me is Brenna Calvert this week, but I do have another special guest. This week's episode is brought to you by Merrill, World's Toughest Mudder with Wesley Kerr as Team Merrill in the team division, the two-man team division, coming up in a couple of days. So we're really excited about that. Merrill's been providing some awesome stuff, some compression gear for the tops, and some shoes. So personally, I like the Trail Glove. It's a fairly minimalist shoe, zero drop. Basically no insole, so when it gets wet, it doesn't really add weight. You can also check out their All-Out Crush, which is their Tough Mudder branded shoe. A little more weight in it, which means a little more cushioning. Also a nice shoe. I've been using that in some of my training runs. So definitely check them out. They also sent me the softest jacket I've ever seen in my life. It's like a puffy jacket, but it's amazing. And with that, we'll get to our guest today, Jared Renyer. Jared is a certified personal trainer with a bachelor's degree in fitness and wellness. He specializes in OCR athletes as well as general population clientele. He's the owner of JRen Fitness, which I talked about on, I think it was 2 podcasts ago, the call-in episode. Jared has completed several OCRs starting in 2014 and was a qualifier and participant in 2016 OCR World Championships. Jared's currently studying for his master's in exercise science, and you can find him on Facebook at JRen Fitness. So, Jared, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Well, it's great to have another personal trainer on here. Bounce ideas off people. And
right.
I think what's cool about personal training and nutrition and stuff like that is, there's multiple paths to success, and not everyone has to agree on every aspect. So I'm kind of curious to see where our conversation takes us today.
I have a feeling just from prior conversations we're not going to be that different, unfortunately.
Jared and I typically, after listening to other OCR podcasts, we usually chat back and forth via Facebook Messenger. So a lot of times I know we agree on stuff, but
I'm sure we'll find something to disagree
All
on.
right, sounds good. So while I know most people are getting ready for World's Toughest Mudder, myself included, there's currently like a ton of great content out there, so I don't want to bring you more World's Toughest Mudder content. I want to bring something else. So if you do want World's Toughest Mudder content, head over to Overcome and Run. I was just on their podcast with Heather Bodie and Allison Ty. And then on top of that, Will Hicks from the World's Toughest Podcast has also been dropping episodes almost every day this week. So lots of good World's Toughest content out there. Instead, we're going to go to a different direction. We're going to talk about the off-season, since a lot of people who raced OCR World Championships are not doing World's Toughest Mudder and are probably now in their off-season, or they got like 1 or 2 races left. So, Jared, let's start off with that. So let's go with, why is the off-season important, and just kind of give me some of your thoughts on that.
Well, for me, kind of my thought process, off-season is a time to fix what was broken during the regular season. So, in season, let's say, your obstacle completion was there, but your splits in between were not. So, okay, now it's time to work on that, that half-mile speed in between. Or let's say, your speed was okay, but if you're doing a Conquer the Gauntlet or longer race, after that 5K mark, after that 3 miles, you just, run out of gas. Okay, now we need to work on that aerobic threshold, just improving that gas tank, that sort of stuff. And, the arguably most, I don't want to say any one part is more important than the other, but, the namesake of obstacle course racing, if you can't complete some of the obstacles, then we need to work on that sort of stuff.
Right on. So good time to focus on our weaknesses based off of last season's results. Kind of sum up, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So let's take a couple different athletes, and if there's anything different, kind of how would you schedule their off season, right? So like let's talk about, someone who's doing something like a Tough Mudder X versus someone who's doing like a Warrior Dash versus maybe a little bit longer like OCRWC versus, the far end of the spectrum, World's Toughest Mudder. So,
Okay. Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
So with the Tough Mudder X, that's obviously a very unique type of competition. It's a short course, but it's even shorter. It's arguably half or less than half of what most short courses out there are. So you've got, and then in that you've got, instead of just having 10 different obstacles or something like that, you've got 10 different obstacles that are Tough Mudder style obstacles. So they're these big, giant, grandiose things. And then you've also got 10, I believe that's right, 10 CrossFit-inspired workout stations that are usually stationed right before or right after those obstacles. So that's going to be a very unique training style. So with that, if that's what something that somebody's willing to focus on, first and foremost, they're going to be hitting the weight room and be doing a lot of those explosive Olympic-type movements, that sort of thing. They're going to have to learn how to do some burpees. They're going to have to learn how to do those Olympic lifts, whether it's an overhead snatch, overhead squat, things like that. So just learning the technique with that is going to be the most important factor, so someone's not hurting themselves, and then increasing the weight from there. Then also, that's going to be a highly anaerobic workout, so trying to increase that anaerobic threshold as much as possible, increase that ATP, and I'm going to go sciencey on you guys, but increase the fuel system for the sprints, and also increase that kind of middle ground for the lactate system. Now, granted, being as how those races are, they're not done in 2.5 minutes, there is going to be an aerobic standpoint as well, so you're going to have to do some long-distance running, but with that, it's not, I'm not going to go send anybody out on a 5-10 mile run with that in mind. It might be, let's work on a 5K, let's kind of keep that sort of stuff there, where it is still in the anaerobic range, but someone's able to keep that pace fairly high between those stations like that. So that would be for that style of competition. The Rugged Maniac, or your Rugged Maniac Warrior Dash type, your 5K mud runs, so to speak, where their obstacles are not as intense. Maybe work on some grip strength, just working on holding your body with your hands overhead. So, and I don't think off the top of my head, I haven't done a Warrior Dash, but just going off of Rugged Maniac. They don't have any weird grips on anything. So if you have, I think just holding on to a pull-up bar or something like that, and trying to increase how long you can hold on to that will do wonders. And then again, with those, getting some more miles under your belt, so maybe that 3 to 5 mile range running there.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. Yeah, Warrior Dash has one rig type obstacle. It's called Fisherman's Catch, but it actually does have some like nunchucks in there, so some kind of hard stuff. But so it's a rig over water, but above the water is a net, so you can actually just like run across the net, kind of defeating the purpose of the rig obstacle. And like the rules, they don't say you have to cross only with your hands. I always cross only with my hands because it just feels wrong to run across a rig, like the floor of a rig. But I know, like I've seen seen pictures of people in the behind me, and some of them just step on the net and keep running. I mean, technically that's within the rules, so yeah.
It's technically within the rules, but I'm a big spirit of the obstacle kind of guy, so I would want to go across that way. But just putting your hands in the position of what you're going to hold. So whether it is, if you have access to nunchucks, things like that, that will help. But if you don't, there's ways to kind of fake that in the gym. So, again, because we have to hold our own body weight, I'm a big proponent of weights, especially in the off season. I think I'm a little on the heavier influenced weight side during season than a lot of people are, but we can kind of get into that a little bit later if we want to. But, so if you're doing like lat pull downs or something like that for, overall strength in the off season, just putting your hands in that position. So people are like, well, your lat pull down is a T-bar, or it's that long wide bar. doesn't necessarily have to be. Attach kind of your rope grips that a lot of people use for tricep pushdowns. Attach that. That way your hand is going to be in that same position as to hold on to a nunchuck. Pull down that way, and then you're just kind of learning that muscle memory of holding on to weight in that position overhead. And then especially, if you get into a position where you need to actually pull yourself up, again, your brain is going, hey, we know how to do this, and then makes that just a little bit easier. So that is kind of grip training into the Warrior Dash, Rugged Maniac type of stuff. Then, again, still have those people lifting weights because we're going to be moving our body through something that's going to provide resistance, especially all that mud. Anyone who's gone even knee-deep in mud realizes that is not an easy task to move through. So work on that. Again, it's going to be largely an aerobic activity, not an anaerobic activity. So you're going to be working at a pace that you want your body to provide oxygen. So again, we're going to learn how to do those long runs and providing energy slowly for the body like that. Then ramping up to your longer races, like you said, the Tough Mudders, Tough Mudders and World Championships, your 9-mile races. Again, a lot of that same stuff, just going to be more miles under the belt. There's going to be a lot of intervals in between. So kind of working the whole body systems there. We want to work sprint systems for the explosion to get over walls, pull-ups, that sort of thing. We want to work that in-between system, that lactate threshold. The longer we can do that, we can kind of keep that fast pace for a little bit longer without burning out. And then, again, we still want to be able to kind of get into what they call that steady state, find your pace more or less, that your body can just kind of sit at and hold that, whether you're just beginning and it's closer to a 10-minute pace, or whether you're on that elite level and between obstacles, or actually between obstacles, it's going to, if people are averaging, a 7 or 8 minute pace to podium in a lot of these races, between obstacles, they're probably sub 6, maybe even, in that 5 to 6 minute mile range in between obstacles. You know more about the podium guys than I do. Is that about right from your experience?
It really depends on the race. I mean, something like a Conquer the Gauntlet where the obstacles are a lot harder, my pace is a lot slower, and I'm not.
Right.
I don't actually check I'm not sure what my pace is between obstacles. I just kind of know what my average pace is overall. So.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, people are moving out pretty good. Especially, I'd say that first mile is always fast. People are.
You get the rabbits
are around 6, right? Either depending on the level, the field of competition, it may be just above 6, or it may be significantly below 6. But it's somewhere in that
right.
somewhere in that range, right off the gun, until people settle in.
Right, because they said you're going to take, depending on the obstacle, you slow down, stop at the obstacle, move through that, and then your splits in between are going to be quicker than your overall pace dictates. But kind of learning to settle into whatever that pace is going to be done on some of those long slow distance. And the bad thing about those long slow distance runs is, especially the elite to competitive wave people, they're usually very type A personalities, not always, but still a very competitive person, because that's why they run in those heats. And telling them to slow down does not register, especially when you go, hey, we want you to go faster, so slow down.
Yeah.
So your heart rate can stay in that zone. That doesn't make any sense. I could tell you all the science behind it, but trust me, it makes sense. So one of those where almost, if you can kind of carry on a conversation, you might be going a little bit too slow, but if you're having to stop and slow down, catch your breath, that sort of stuff, then you're going too fast on those long, slow distance runs. For some people, you may have to start out at a power walk or something like that, just to keep your heart rate in that right zone, because it can be slow, especially starting out. So
yeah, I think we're on the same page there. I'm a big believer in aerobic training. I think you just get it develops your physiology a lot to the point where it allows for faster running. And I used to, when I would train for marathons, right, so before I got into OCR, I would do most of my runs at like 8 minutes per mile, or sometimes like 8:30, and then I would show up on race day and run 6:52 minute miles for 3 hours, and do it well, right? Like it's not like I wouldn't blow up. I would usually dead even split or slightly negative, with doing almost no speed work. It was like always just doing aerobic training. So
Right.
I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, if you can expand that aerobic range and be able to push harder at that and keep that during race day, that will serve you well during the race. But and then for your world's toughest, and this I'm kind of admittingly stealing from other people because I've never ran those, but I have a lot of clients this year who are wanting to get into that in this coming season. So, but it's going to be long runs, maybe a long slow distance run after a leg day, a long slow distance run right after another long slow distance run the previous day. Learning to work when the body's tired. One is kind of an active recovery, so your body is learning how to work while it's not necessarily in the best shape, and then also just the mindset of that exact same thing. Your body's going to learn how to work when it's not necessarily wanting to work. And I don't mean work as in the sense of functioning, but in the sense of going out doing things above and beyond what it's normally doing.
Gotcha. So as your athletes transition from more of an off season into more race specific, they start getting into races, once a month or once every couple of weeks. What do you kind of tweak and change in their scheduling?
With that, I definitely put a taper in there the week, and it depends on how important the race is, whether it's their main race they want to do that year. Just, if it's someone who has, like I have a couple clients who have lifetime passes to Conquer the Gauntlet. So if it's, just another Conquer the Gauntlet that they want to do well in, but not necessarily be their best race, we won't taper for quite as long. But going into it, talk myself into a corner. Can you repeat the question for me?
So just kind of what do you change in their scheduling between the more of their off season and then more of their kind of in season? When they're starting to do races every month or so.
So with that, their lifting will go from off season being very strength based into in season being very endurance based. So the rep ranges will move, the sets will move accordingly. That's one thing. That's one of the big things. Running distances are going to move. We're in the off season. They may be a little bit heavier because we're not having to rest 4 races in season, depending on when the schedule is. That's going to tweak. So those long, slow distances might not be quite as long as they were, back in January, or might not be quite as long as they were 2 weeks before the race, just because of how that taper works. So, and then the workouts themselves will be a lot more OCR specific. So whereas, like I said, very power in the off seasons can be very strength based, a lot of big multi-joint lifts, things like that, lots of big squats, deadlifts, weighted pull-ups, things like that. During season, it might just be pull-ups, just max number of pull-ups, how many you can rep out. For legs, it will be a lot of single leg stuff, because once we get into activity, there is very few things we do in OCR or life, for that matter, that is we're pushing with both at the same time. Running, you're pushing off one leg at a time. Slackline, you got to balance one leg at a time. So for a number of obstacles, except maybe a wall, if someone is a 2-footer, which a lot of people are, unless they're a 2-footed jumper, that's going to be one of the only things they're doing with 2 feet equally during the race. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things that I do is moving to a lot of unilateral training. And that goes same thing for arms, because unless your arms are directly hooked on to something at the same length, you're going to be pulling differently with each arm too, depending on the obstacle. So, yeah.
I think that's real interesting. I like that. I like that approach. I haven't been doing much single leg movement training, so I think I might incorporate that into my off season this year. But I'm definitely a big believer in the single arm. Like you said, arm training, right? Because it's specific. Mm-hmm. How many times do you hang from one arm? Even if it's for a millisecond, right? Like you're going to make that transition, I still only have one arm at the bar or one arm on the hold as I'm moving.
Right.
So, and again, agree with the back-to-back long days for obviously ultra-distance obstacle course racing. I think you can get a similar physiological effect and similar training effect without causing as much stress on the joints and the mind, right? Versus
exactly.
you'll see, I see a lot of people will post, especially they'll be like, oh, I did, 30 miles at Tough Mudder on Saturday, and I did 10 miles on Sunday, and now I can't walk for 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, you probably would have been better off just doing 10 and 10, and then training again starting on Tuesday. So I think, people, you see what other people do, and you want to mimic them, and it sounds epic. Just kind of, everyone's at a different level, so just kind of, I would say, keep that in mind. Kind of anyone listening.
I made that mistake on my own training last year. I was getting ready for Worlds, and I knew I needed to get, if I can run 10 miles in the real world, I can do 9 miles with the obstacles. I forgot. I didn't know those hills were going to be there. That was, unfair on their part. They didn't tell me about that, but I should have known. But
yeah, it's tricky when it's called Blue Mountain, right?
Yeah, exactly. But
why would there be a mountain there?
I looked it up, but, it wasn't on a mountain. It was like a little ski resort. Okay, no, the elevation's not that high. I'll be fine. But, so I go to do a 10-mile run here at home, and I jumped, wasn't sticking with that kind of 10% increase each week as far as how to move that up. I just kind of skipped from 8 miles or 7 miles right over 10. Like, oh, it's only 3 more miles. Not that big of a deal. It was a big deal. I didn't run for the rest of the week at all. So that kind of put, just because it hurt so bad, and I wanted to be able to, I'm like, okay, since I did this, I need to be able to recover, and so I can kick it back up for the next week. But yeah, it's just, like you said, don't go out and do something that just because you see other people doing it to try and make up for it, whether it be for the social media experience or for, just for your own training. Just play your own game, move up incrementally, play it smart, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think a lot of people kind of do things for social media when, realistically, most of your training, no one cares and no one sees, right? Like you're,
Right.
I typically train twice a day most days, and it's, I don't post about it, and it's just what I'm doing. You don't get to show off until race day. That's the celebration of what you've been working on. One other thing I wanted to touch on that you said was, you're a big advocate on weight training for OCR athletes, and I'd actually prefer if we were at opposing point of views, because I think this would make for a more interesting podcast. But I agree with that. I'm a big, and part of it's because of my background, because that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, so that's what I enjoy doing. So I'm going to put more effort into that if I enjoy it. That's one of the reasons I do it. But then the other part is I just don't think you can get that same stress to your body just doing body weight movements. Just my 2 cents. And I think, especially for ultra-distance OCR, right, where I'm doing, repeated, I'm just doing them over and over again for 24 hours, right? Like I'm not going to practice doing some of these movements for 24 hours to build up that strength. Instead, I increase the stress, cut the time down significantly into like a 1 hour, 1.5 hour workout or whatever it is, to try to get that same response. And based off my personal experience, I mean, last year at World's Toughest, the only 2 obstacles I failed were the grappler twice, which is like that you throw that ball up on top of the. Which, I mean, that's because I'm uncoordinated. It has nothing to do with my strength, right? Like, there's a reason. I always say there's a reason I do repetitive motion sports, right? Like running and, I guess OCR is not as repetitive because you need some variation there, but still, I'm still hanging from my hands, right?
Yeah, it's not motor skill based, other than move your hands across the rig.
Yeah, I don't do ball sports, right? Like I don't throw, I don't throw balls. It's just not, not my style.
I'm approaching it from a very similar aspect. I have a weightlifter background. Played soccer from the time I was 4 or 5. Moved up, and then even within that, it was kind of odd that I was lifting weights while playing soccer. But going back, looking at it through a different lens, since I've had more time in the classroom, on top of all of the strength to do the obstacles, things like that, lifting weights has also been shown as, for lack of a better term, a body hardening, a more resilience building exercise. So those people who have lifted weights, one, You're going to have better bone density. Running does help build bone density somewhat, but not on the same level that, putting a squat bar on your back does, or putting your joints through some of those motions in a very simplified manner. Putting that weight on your skeleton adds stress. Your body responds to that stress and says, hey, if we're going to be putting this kind of load on the system, we need to have a bigger, stronger system. So on top of making your muscles stronger, it also adds a density to your bones to be able to take that weight. So that goes for football players who get hit. That's why they don't break bones. When most of us, if I get hit by, those big giant linebackers, I'm probably going to die. As opposed to, Darren Sproles, who's roughly my same size. He gets drilled by those guys daily. Now, granted, he has pads on, but still, very similar. There's a reason why he's not breaking by guys who are hitting him who are 1.5 times his size. It's because his skeleton has built up that resilience. So same thing for, you take that to OCR. We always see people, slipping off a rig, falling off a rig, twisting, breaking, whatever. It's not uncommon, and it's more for the open heat people. But that's kind of where I talk with my general population clientele as well. Like, this, not only are you getting the physiological adaptations, but your body will be just stronger in general from the aspect that it will be able to handle more stress. Whether that is an acute stress placed on an outside force, whether you're falling off the rig and, your knee hitting something like that, because we've heard people breaking bones like that, or just that repeated stress of running a 5-mile race. Because how many races have we been to where, invariably someone from the open wave falls and breaks something or falls and twists something? It's sad that that happens, but there's a reason why not very many elites are having it happen, because many of the elites lift weights, or even the competitive wave people, that's not happening to. One, they've played this game before, but also their body is built up to resist those forces. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know that's scientifically backed, and then from an empirical data standpoint, I do a lot of my training with running clubs because, it's just a group of people who are going to run for a long time, so it makes it a lot easier to go running. Specifically in Kansas City, I run with a group called Sunday Run Day North, and they set out aid stations every 2 miles out to 8 miles. So essentially you can actually run 19, because if you go a mile past the last aid station and a mile back, you have 19 miles with aid stations every 2 miles on a marked course. So it's pretty, 18 miles. My math has been all messed up this week. I messed up on the Overcome and Run podcast too. I had poor math there because I did it off the top of my head. But
yeah,
anyway,
my math isn't good. I didn't catch you either. So.
Oh, good. Well, I said in order to get 40 miles, you'd have to do each obstacle 8 times, which is true if the obstacles were open all the time. But
right.
I also said that you'd skip the obstacle twice, so really you'd only do them 6 times for 40 miles-ish. Anyway, I'm digressing.
Yeah.
Like I said, from an empirical data standpoint, right, I know a lot of the guys who go to the run clubs will, a lot of them will get injured, basically overuse injuries, because
right.
They're always running. That's the only sport they do. They never lift weights, and that's their, all right, I run year round. I never take an off season. I never take breaks, and I think it just beats up your body physically and mentally.
Right.
Versus, again, from a personal experience level, I was bouncing back and forth between, strength-based and speed-based sports, hence the name of the podcast. Good plug for myself. But
there you go.
Yeah, and I found, when my friends and stuff were getting injured, I found I was a little more resilient than them because, I think because of some of the stuff you said, and it prevents some of that overuse of, whatever, tibial stress fracture and plantar fasciitis, all these common runner injuries, right? I've just never had them. The only serious injury I've ever had was I tore my pec in early February, which we talked about a couple times on the podcast.
Yep.
But that's just from I was using a lot of weight. It was bad. I shouldn't have been using that much weight. Although it was within my, I could do 5 reps of that weight, and I'd done it before. It just, I don't know, my body didn't like it that day. So.
Right.
Yeah. let's see what else we got here. All right, so you train a lot of people. I know from the elite level all the way down to the general population, like we talked about. So give me some like common trends you see. So I'd say from the elite level, maybe common mistakes they're making, and then let's start with there. So elite level, maybe some common mistakes you think some of the OCR athletes are making.
Okay, so like the one thing that I kind of already touched on was just wanting to run faster all the time. That long, slow distance, I don't think a lot of elites or a lot of just general population or general public don't necessarily know the physiological purpose behind the long, slow distance. So I think that's a big one across the board. For more of that competitive middle of the pack group, I think a lot of that group wants to try and work at that elite level tomorrow rather than building up to it over time. So a lot of that group, I think, will go out and push themselves too hard on whatever the exercise is. So just kind of staying in that same, about like I said, like I did to myself. I wanted to be able to run that 10 miles. Yep, I ran it, and then I didn't run for the next week. So knowing kind of where they are as opposed to where they think they are or where they want to be, just kind of that self-awareness sort of deal. And then for a lot of the mistakes, I think the open wave people make is going to be kind of similar to that. With the open wave, I think when they sign up for whether it be your neighborhood 5K or that first Warrior Dash or whatever, they kind of want to go out and just start running to get ready for it. And I heard a quote, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was off a different podcast. But people want to run to be fit when, in fact, you need to be fit to be able to run. So with that, that's kind of why that Couch to 5K starts off with more walking than jogging, because like we just finished up with, that repetitive stress on the body, something will give eventually until that body is ready for it. So people are like, I'm just going to go out and go for a jog like I did in college, or like I did in high school 15, 20 years ago and hadn't done anything since.
Yeah.
We can't quite do that like we used to. No, even with going back to the elites, they want to keep, if I drop off, I'll lose everything. Okay, no, not you. No, one, you've already built up to this higher level of fitness anyway, so your body will know what it's doing with that. And then I think the other problem that I think a lot of elites have, especially if they have a strong running background, because runners are kind of like you talked about earlier, they just get a lot of bad ideas in their head, and they just want to keep going. Like you said, they don't take an off season. Like I have one client, Randy. You better be listening to this. She's already said I can't do an off season. I don't know what to do. Like, don't worry, I'll tell you. But it's you're not just going to be sitting on the couch twiddling your thumbs 5 days a week for resting. We're still going to be working out. We're still going to be moving, but it's not this 365. At least 7 miles a day for your easy days, and then ramping it up to 20 from on your hard days. It's all right. We're going to let you rest, let your body undo everything that you've done to it over the past. Let's see, depending on where you live, March through October, and because ideally, people, if that's their season, they're working up to October, so they put a lot of stress come that last race in October or November for World's Toughest competitors. After that, 2 to 3, 2 weeks at a very minimum, 3 weeks to a month off of just maybe 3 days a week. Lifting weights, getting some light runs in, and we're not lifting heavy weights at this point. Just letting that body relax, take some of that stress off. You're not going to lose a whole lot in that because, like I said, we're still moving, we're still lifting weights, but it is a big time to let that body recover, get hormones back in balance for a lot of people because you've just been working so much. So, yeah.
Yeah, again, on the same page here, if people are doubting some of that, aerobic, backing up a little bit, so if people are doubting some of that aerobic training to build faster speed, there's several, look at any big running book out there. I mean, Jack Daniels, the running coach, not the alcohol, is a great book about, run training. I model a lot of my personal training off of him. Matt Fitzgerald wrote a book called 80-20, who basically says 80% of your run should be aerobic and easy, and the other 20% should be hard and fast via intervals or threshold training, stuff like that. So there's a lot of data backing it up. And I know some people look at some of the elites and go, oh, well, this guy only runs, 4 times a week or 3 times a week and runs whatever pace, And I think, again, people get confused because that guy may have, thousands of hours of training background previous. He may have run in high school and college and, so he can get away with that. And then some people are just genetically gifted where they can get away with, a little bit faster running at a little bit lower speed. But I think a lot of those that don't have the run training volume would get even better if they followed more of an aerobic, that 80-20 approach.
Exactly.
So, my 2 cents there. Are you familiar with not a fitness author, but kind of, I'm not sure what he is, psychologist maybe? Malcolm Gladwell. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not. Huh.
Okay, so Malcolm Gladwell, and I think I have an article prepared for this that I just never put out. I think it's on my desktop. So Malcolm Gladwell says that in order to achieve mastery in anything, the average person will spend 10,000 hours doing that activity.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've heard the 10,000 hours. Just didn't know the name associated with it. Yep.
So I think people, one of the confusion points is that people go, oh, well, I need to do, I'm sorry, and it's not just 10,000 hours, it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice is the actual phrase.
Yeah.
So people go, oh, well, I need to do 10,000 hours to achieve, like, if I hit 10,000 hours, I achieve mastery. And it's like, well, it doesn't guarantee mastery. It's the average master has a practice for 10,000 hours.
Right.
And so there's a book called Outliers where they talk about it. There's a couple other books, like Talent is Overrated, where it basically says, when people put in the time, and again, it's not over a year or over 2 years, it's over a lifetime.
Yeah.
They get better as you get close to that 10,000 hours. You achieve that level of mastery. I'm not sure where I was going with that.
But no, and this is going off topic a little bit, but I think a lot of parents have heard that, and that kind of it bleeds down into youth sports, and so that's where you get these parents, wanting their kids to spend, because the math works out to 3 hours a day, I think between the age of 5 and 18. I'm probably wrong on that, but you see these parents, their kids have to be working on this stuff for 3 hours a day of direct practice, 3 hours a day of direct practice, right, and things like that, but along those lines, like you said, it's more of a lifetime rather than a finite skill set, because taking you for example, just because I know a little bit more about your background, you didn't start out running marathons and ultras on year 2, maybe marathons, but that was not you're not finishing top 10 every time in those ultras on your second year. You have to build up to that. And until you get to where you did this year, some ungodly, strange number of 24-hour runs for some reason, that, it's, you hear people like, well, Evan did it, or, so-and-so can do that. Like, good for so-and-so. They've been doing this for X amount of years. It wasn't just a, one-time skill thing from when they were kids up to high school and then they stopped. No, it's been, now I know you weren't a sports guy as a kid, but, since college you've been building up to that.
Yeah, I mean, I played soccer growing up, right? So that was a form of running, and then I was on cross country in high school, but I wasn't very good, and I show up to practice most of the times, but not all the time, But yeah, there was a base there. There's still some sort of physical movement base.
Right. So you had somewhat of a base there, but like I said, you weren't at a super high level for you didn't have D1 schools knocking down your door to come play soccer or to come run on their team. I could barely make the high school team. Exactly. So it's just one of those things where, that 10,000 hours is very, and actually now they've gone and shown and this is going to more on the kid on the youth sports side, so I'll try and stay out of that. But it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, but also with a wide breadth of other skills outside of that one as well, because then that kind of gets into the burnout and that sort of mental capacity of it as well. That if you just spend 10,000 hours focusing on one handful of skills, that's not going to work. So you have to spend those hours on, that handful of skills, and then another X, however many other X thousand hours on complementary skills to come up and build that, so you don't go crazy working on that handful.
Yeah, I know I've seen studies that say especially for youth, being well-rounded is actually going to be better for later in life, right? Because, again, what if you decide you don't like running, you like obstacle course racing, or you like whatever you want to look at, having that well-rounded base, I think especially for obstacle course racing is going to be better because, even the sport's been around, when I say sport, I'm referring to like the modern era where, world championships, Spartan and Tough Mudder, it's been around for like 7 years, right? And already you've seen such drastic changes in the obstacles and the skills required to do well. I guess Hobie Cole is a bad example because he won essentially the first year of Spartan and then won like not this past year, but 2 years ago or whatever, a little over a year ago.
2016. Yeah.
But I think a lot of the other names that you saw showing up in 2011 and 2012 are no longer in the sport. Either they lost interest or they didn't have the skill set required, to do well at stuff like OCR World Championships.
Right.
It's more than just running and carrying a sandbag. The amount of variation you need on the rig, stuff like rigs is pretty profound. So.
Well, in that, and look at, arguably the biggest name in the sport hasn't won OCR Worlds yet that I know of, at least not in the standard distance, but Atkins.
Yep.
He comes from a mountain biking background, not a running, or that he was doing that competitively when he came into OCR. So, it's one of those things where having that, yes, that's still a endurance sport, but not nearly the same as OCR or running. But it's one of those where, like you said, he's obviously doing a lot of OCR and running now since that's his paycheck, but just one of those things where the bleed over can help out a lot.
And I think that even ties back into doing a lot of aerobic, like long, slow aerobic training, right? Because on a mountain bike, your heart rate's spiking for periods, but at the same time, for most cycling, you're doing, your heart rate's significantly lower than it is running.
Right.
So I think, and then people typically go for longer bike rides, like you go for an hour run and most people think that's good versus we go for an hour bike ride. It's like nice warm up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, all right, when does the workout start? So
yeah, a 5 mile run might be, might be someone's limit, but then they'll go hop on a 20-mile bike ride. So.
Yeah, I used to have a friend that I worked with who was a big cyclist. He was, all about cycling, and he didn't do a lot of run training, but he was super fast. And I think a lot of that was just from, again, lots of aerobic training on his bike. He'd go for a 3-hour ride on some days and, go home after work and, cycle for an hour or two. And I think that transferred over real well. So
probably.
I started incorporating some spin classes and stuff into my training to boost my aerobic capability. So I guess we'll find out how it works in a week.
Well, along those lines, I've been having I've been experimenting with some of my clients to start adding in more cycling. Because like I said, one, for that aerobic training, but two, also just to reduce some of that wear and tear. Because I've had a couple clients that are a little bit older, Lucas, who, towards the end of the season, just that constant running over from March all the way through starts to wear on them. Okay, what can we do to keep that anaerobic, or what can we do to keep that aerobic base, but cut down on the pounding on the ankles, knees, hips, all that sort of stuff? Cycling. So that's one thing that, whether you're working around an injury or just wanting to prevent an injury, some of the changes in that can help a lot.
I also find it a little less stressful, right? So when I run, I try not to be too concerned about pace, but at the same time, I know what like a good running pace is and what a crappy running pace is for me, right?
Right.
Like it's hardwired into my brain. I can't let go of that. When I cycle, because I've only done I've done a couple triathlons, and but I've never done just straight a cycling race. I've done a bike tour, so maybe that's not true. It's not really a race though. But like it doesn't, like I'm not concerned about my pace as much.
Right. It's a lot more relaxing, just mentality from the start.
Yeah. So like I have no problem going to spin class, and I have no idea how much quote unquote miles I covered.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter. I was just elevating my heart rate for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And and then my gym has espresso trainer, so it's like a video game bicycle. So I ride that sometimes too.
Oh, nice.
You get to like move your guy on the screen. And it keeps track of like what stages you've ridden. It's pretty fun.
That's how to keep me focused.
Yeah. And then the other cool thing is so you enter your login and it remembers you. So when you ride, there'll be like a ghost of you from a previous ride if you've ridden that course already.
Oh, so it's like Mario Kart, but for cycling and working out.
Yeah, exactly. No power-ups though. They need to work on power-ups.
Yeah, but see, then you start cheating, and that wouldn't get.
Oh
as
yeah,
good
that's true. That's true. That's a good point. Oh, they do have games though, so like you can go to, instead of you riding like an actual stage, you can go to like play Dragon Chase or something. And you ride around and collect like power-ups and stuff like that. But it's that's like free form, right? It's just like a big open area, and you just kind of zigzag around. Anyway, it's good. I'm gonna definitely incorporate some more cycling into my off season, and then again continue to use it for adding aerobic training to my in-season racing.
Right.
All right, I think we got a pretty good coverage on that. The last thing, I know we were talking about it on Facebook Messenger recently, but Spartan recently came out with a bunch of new age brackets. And we don't talk about Spartan on this podcast that much, but since we had already had a conversation a little bit about it, I figured we can discuss it a little bit. But I know, if you're not tracking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Spartan did away with Masters completely. Like, that's no longer a thing. And they've instead replaced it with all these different age brackets. So it's like...
I think they still have a Masters, but I think it's like either 15 up or 16 up or something like that. So it's Extreme Masters.
Grandmasters as well.
Yeah, Grandmasters, yep.
Yeah. So anyway, caused a bit of a stir in the OCR community. So I just kind of wanted to get some of your thoughts on that, on the different age brackets. And I know they spread out the qualifications very weird.
Right.
So yeah.
So with the age groups, if I don't have it here in front of me, but I think it's like 13 to 18 or 13 to 19 is one of the age groups. They have 20s, 20 to 24, 25 to 29. And then the part that's making everybody mad is the 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and then 50 plus, or 50 to 59, whatever those are. And so a lot of people are saying that, the aging between 40 and 49 is too big, or the aging between 50 and 59 is too big, that they should make an 18 to 29 age bracket, or an 18 to 25, and then 30 to, split up that way. With that, I can see where they're coming from. I'm not 40, or I'm not 49, so I don't have that to go off of. So I may be speaking out of turn, but also just from watching, my family age, having clients at different ranges in the age spectrum, aging is very individual. It's all, from being genetics, how some people age, to how you took care of yourself during your life, whether you did a good job of keeping yourself fit, or whether you had a period of time where you didn't do so well and now you're having to play catch up, things with that. And then, people arguing, well, why does the 20-year-old age group why do they get two groups rather than just one like everybody else? And just from a personal standpoint, I'm not going to say late bloomer or anything like that, but just from the sake of putting on mass and muscle mass, I changed more from 18 to 25 than I have since, or in any other phase of my life. Now, granted, I'm only in my early 30s, but still, like, after 25, or I should say 18 to 25, was all fairly the same. I got a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, but I also had other stuff going on. But not until age 25 did I actually put on any quote-unquote muscle per se, because I was still running, still playing soccer, things like that. And when, once all that kind of stopped, because I got just other stuff happened in my life, But that's when my body finally put on muscle. So that's kind of when you see all these different age groups. You're wanting to have these 18-year-olds compete with 26, 27. Well, I don't think too many people are going to argue that men reach their physiological peak, athletic peak, whatever you want to call it, as far as muscle development, things of that nature, at age 25. So you want these 18-year-olds who are maybe just going through puberty or just getting a handle on it, starting to grow a mustache, good for them. But I want them to compete with these 25-year-olds who have arguably 10 years of weight training under their belt. Now they've got muscle maturation, things of that nature. They've got 10 more, over half of these kids' lifetime of running experience under their belt, and you're going to call that, you want that to be one group? Personally, I don't get it. Now, moving into the older age brackets, 30 to 39, now, am I arguing that there is a difference between a 30-year-old and a 39-year-old physiologically, wear and tear? No. But what was it, last 2 years, the Spartan Championship was won by a 39-year-old? Wasn't, and you'll know the ages on these people more than I will, but Cody Moat is not a spring chicken as far as the racing world is considered. I think they said he was late 30s, at least mid 30s. Hobie, he won last year when he was 39. So I'm not seeing that whole split there that, 35, 39, or, 30 to 34, 35 to 39 should be split. For people in their 40s, again, kind of that same argument. Hobie's 40. Now, granted, he's obviously an outlier compared to most 40-year-olds, but he was still up there competing with these younger people.
Yeah.
And so with that, granted, you should take you should be talking about your average 40-year-old versus your average 49-year-old. Is there going to be a gap there? Yes. But also, where are your biggest numbers coming from? Your biggest numbers are going to be in that 25 to 35 age group, I think. So splitting up those like they are, I think makes a lot of sense. But, yeah, it's just one of those things that with aging being so individualized on how you've cared for yourself and how you've trained or haven't trained through your lifetime, I get their argument. I just don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can say from personal experience, I'm going to go ahead and say I've gotten faster every year, with the exception of maybe this year, but that's not necessarily, that's more to do with my racing schedule. At least I think so.
Right.
But every year I would set PRs in races or move up in placements and stuff like that. For the last 15 years, and I think a lot of that's to do with obviously training and diet and general body care. No drinking
right.
and stuff like that. So,
right.
Yeah, we were on the same page. And then from I'd say a business side too, right? It's better to get some younger blood into the sport, right? Because if that guy is commits to the brand and becomes obsessive, like most people are that listen to this podcast or check them out to run guys and stuff like that,
right.
you now have a customer for the next 40 years versus if you have a 40 to 45 age bracket, I don't know how much longer that guy's doing an OCR.
Right.
Maybe he'll go until he dies, but probably not. Chances are he'll lose interest. So
right. Go ahead.
I think focusing on that younger, because you want that younger base to come in, because they're the ones who are probably going to show up with their friends, and kind of
right.
grow the sport from the young youth up. So
right. It's easier to convince an office of 22 to 27-year-olds to go do a weekend race than it is to convince an office of 40 to 47-year-olds to go do a race. And, one argument by, and I don't know who it was, but someone said, no, they're upsetting, or I think his actual words are pissing off. But, they're upsetting the apple cart for the group that has the most disposable income. Okay, I get that argument. But again, that group might have the most disposable income, but it's not the biggest group. Like we just said, they're not going to pull the most people. Those people who are already committed to the lifestyle 20 years ago, and just here in the last 7 years, this racing has come along. Or like for me, I didn't start it until 3 years ago. So, it's one of those things, like I said, if you can hook them when they're younger, from a business standpoint, it's going to go up the chain. Now, are they upsetting people who are invested? Yes. But if they can get people to commit to this now, who are going to have 20 years worth of races rather than maybe 5 years left, or, or one injury away from a lot slower recovery than that 22-year-old. So it's just, I get it, but sorry, dude.
Yeah. I mean, people usually don't like change, right? I mean,
yeah.
If you were 36 a couple years ago and you've been looking forward to this Masters division, and now it's fucking right? That sucks. Because this year you were like, next year's my year. I'll be in the Masters. I'll be on that Masters, top 10 leaderboard or whatever position. And now it doesn't exist, right? So.
Well, then just go to a different series that has a Masters division. Problem solved.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. All right, so I think we covered a pretty good range of topics there. Off-season training, some general fitness stuff, and then talking about the Spartan age groups, which, again, I concur with I think almost all the statements you just said.
At least out of this, go ahead.
Yep, go for it.
At least out of this, you got your single leg training that was new or something we didn't.
That is new.
About,
that is new for me. So I am excited to do that. Before we go, any sponsors, people, whatever you want to thank while we have you?
Thank you to my wife for letting me go to my races and stuff like that. She's done one race, decided it wasn't for her, but she's still let me go off and do all this stuff and take time out to train other people for it as well. So I want to say thank you to her. Sponsors, no one's sponsoring me yet, so if you're listening, heads up. Shameless plug. But shout out to the KCOCR group, the group here in Kansas City that gets together. We try and get together every weekend. Doesn't happen all that, but training together. We actually have an end of the season party coming up here next weekend that you're going to skip. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool, and keep an eye out for JRN Fitness.
Yep.
And also for Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team, working through some things. Not going to announce it on air yet, but
not yet.
Some pretty cool stuff coming. So just kind of keep an eye out for both of those. And Jared, again, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm going to give a final shout out to Merrill because this would be the last podcast I do before World's Toughest Mudder. And so if you're listening to this and you are headed to Vegas, definitely say hi. I will see you on the course. And I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.